Hey guys, it's Justine here from I Should Read That, and today I'm going to bring you my May book haul. You may remember in the month of April, I think I read more books than I bought, which was not the case this time around. I am surrounded by books right now, and I was really bad this month. I really slipped. This is not good. I just counted how many books that I have to show you, and I don't even want to tell you because it's a lot, and I actually bought most of these, which is it's really bad. I'm actually kind of ashamed of myself, and I'm not usually ashamed of myself for the books that I buy, but I bought a lot of books that I didn't need to buy this month. I don't know what I was thinking. So because there are 24 books to show you guys here, I am just going to kind of rattle through them as quick as possible and not spend too much time on them. So as usual, I'm going to split these into books that I received in the post this month from publishers and books that I bought for myself. So let's start with books that I received in the post, because I got very few this month actually, which is probably not a bad thing given how many books that I actually ended up buying for myself. I was convinced that my mailman was actually hoarding my books because I just got no book posts this month. Now things are starting to trickle in. It's the 4th of June right now, and I've received like 3 books that I was expecting earlier in this month, so he's not hoarding my post. I was just being very impatient. I ended up receiving 2 books from publishers this month. I received 2 books from book subscription boxes, and I was gifted a book this month, so let's get into that now. The first book that I received from publishers this month is The Rising Storm, and this is by Carrie A. Lowe. Basically, in this world, the whole dystopia has come about because of storms and weather phenomenon, so people are trying to rebuild. I'm very interested in this. I either really love dystopian novels, or I'm a little bit less keen on them, but I haven't read one in so long, and I'd really love to get back to it. This seems like the perfect opportunity. The next book that I received from publishers this month is Deposed, and this is by David Barbera. So this is a book about the Emperor Nero after he was deposed. This is historical fiction. I love historical fiction, as you guys may know. I don't read enough of it, and I certainly don't read enough in this time period, so this is one that I'm very interested in. Next up is the book that I was gifted this month. So V.E. Schwab was in Oxford early in May, and she did a lecture, and I got my friends and myself tickets, and then I was very ill that day, so my friend ended up getting me a signed copy of Vicious by that author, and here we go for Justine. Isn't that nice? So the funny thing about this is that this friend and I seem to be like forever doomed to swap signed V.E. Schwab copies to each other, because last year at Yelk I got her a signed copy of The Savage Song, and she's got me Vicious, so now we're gonna have to keep this up for a while. Vicious is one that I actually have no idea what it's about. I think it's about villains, like super villains, but I know that the next book, Vengeful, is coming out soon, and that's the book that almost broke V.E. Schwab. I feel like every author has one, but this is one that I'm looking forward to. I have never read anything of hers outside of the Shades of Magic trilogy, which I was not hugely impressed by, but I really like her as a person, and I really like the sound of this book, so we'll see how this one goes. Next up, I have my 2 books from Fairy Loot. So this first one is Beyond a Darkened Shore, and this is by Jessica Leek. So this was the April book, however, the April boxes went out slightly late, so I got this in the beginning of May. This book features Vikings and Celtic magic and mythology and all of that wonderful stuff. This is one that I hadn't heard of, and I wasn't 100% sure about until I received it, and now that I've read the blurb and everything, I think that I'm very interested in this one. I am very bad about reading my Fairy Loot books on time, so hopefully I'll be able to have these done before the next book comes in June. Probably not, though. The other Fairy Loot book that I got this month is Onyx and Ivory, and this is by Mindy Arnett. This is another one that I hadn't heard much about, but I have seen this cover around before. It's one that I tried to get on Edelweiss and was declined pretty aggressively for, so I know nothing about it. I've seen no reviews. I have not seen a copy of this myself in bookshops. I'm really interested in this one. So this is for the Save the Kingdom box, so I imagine it's going to involve saving some sort of kingdom. So next up are the books that I either bought or I swapped for other books that I owned. So I'm gonna, again, rattle through this pretty quickly. So first up, I have a set of 3 books that I got in a 3 for £5 deal from The Works, which is a set of discount shops in the UK. So these are The Tethered Mage by Marissa Caruso. This is one that I know hardly anything about. It was a debut novel from last year. I think the next book is out this year. I've heard great things. I know like nothing about this, but I think it's another sort of forbidden magic type world. And I picked that book up because I spotted these two in the shop, and while I haven't read the first one, I had to get The Obelisk Gate by N.K. Jemisin and The Stone Sky by N.K. Jemisin. So if you don't know, this is the second and third book in the Broken Earth trilogy, which starts with the 5th season, a book I own but have not read yet. I believe these books are, I don't want to read the back because these are the second and third books in the series, but I believe these are sort of a really fresh take on the post-apocalyptic novel. I'm very much looking forward to these. I'm really intrigued by these. Everyone says they're amazing. I haven't heard a single bad thing about this series. I really need to start it, and now I own all of them. I have no excuse. Next up, we have the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society. I have so much trouble saying that title. This is by Mary Ann Schaefer and Annie Barrows. So this was recently made into a movie. This is the film tie-in edition. I've not read this book, but I've heard many, many good things, and I heard the movie was lovely. I don't know much about this book, which I feel is just going to be the theme here, but it's supposed to be wonderful. It's an epistolary novel, which means that it's written as a series of letters, and I love epistolary novels so much. You get a lot of them in kind of Victorian literature. But this looks lovely. It's supposed to be lovely. I bought it because it was one of the buy one get one half price books, and I couldn't resist it. I was going to read it before I saw the movie. I still haven't read it. I still haven't seen the movie. Next up is a book that I, again, know nothing about. This is like the theme for this month. It's like I was buying books without even looking at them. I have a problem, but this is The History of Bees, and this is by Maja Lund. So this one looks actually very interesting. I saw a lot of sort of marketing for it in bookshops, but I haven't heard anything about this book. I've seen no reviews or anything like that, but it looks like it's kind of a split time narrative. So it takes place in England in 1851, the United States in 2007, and China in 2098. So it's kind of I think it's a dystopian novel, and it says fans of The Cloud Atlas and Never Let Me Go will love this book. I love Never Let Me Go. It's one of my favorite books ever of all time. So this kind of spoke to me. I think that when I get to this book, I'm going to be very impressed with it. I think this is going to be a very sneaky favorite for me. Right, moving along quickly, we have Ace of Shades by Amanda Foody. So Amanda Foody came out with Daughter of the Burning City last year. It was her debut novel, and I absolutely loved that book so much. So this is her next book, which is the first in a series. Daughter of the Burning City was a standalone. I'm actually currently reading this now. You can see my super cute Literary Galaxy bookmark, and I'm about 76 pages in. I don't know what to think about this yet, but we'll see how it goes. I have this horrible feeling it's going to be really underwhelming. So this book follows a character named N, and N has to go find her mother who has disappeared. The last place she was seen was this place called New Rains, which is kind of like Atlantic City, Las Vegas type. It's the city of sin, and she is a very sort of properly brought up young woman. She is very much out of her element, but she desperately wants to find her mother before her debut because she's been off in finishing school. This is her chance to get out into society. I'm not very far. I'm going to give it more of a shot this evening, but it should be interesting. We'll see how it goes. Next up, we have a contemporary YA novel, and this is usually not a genre that I enjoy. However, this book has had the most amazing reaction to it and the most wonderful feedback. I've seen glowing reviews of it, so I decided to give it a chance, which I sometimes do for contemporary books, knowing that I might not like them. But this is Starfish, and this is by Akemi Dawn Bowman. So this book follows a young woman named Kiko, and she, I think, has struggled with a lot of her upbringing because she is a mixed race girl. She has some mental health issues, she has anxiety, but I believe she's also been abused at some point. This doesn't sound like it might be my kind of thing, but I really wanted to give it a shot. I like to try out new things, and I've heard just, again, the most wonderful things about this book. It came very highly recommended, so I'm going to give it a try, and I don't know, I have a feeling that this book might take me by surprise. I think I might end up really enjoying this one. Next up, we have The Smoke Thieves by Sally Green. I had a digital arc of this book, which I showed you guys in my Yalk TBR video, but I ended up picking this up anyway. It's not as long as I thought it would be. This is about, yeah, it is just under 500 pages, but I don't know, I felt like it might be a little bit more effective for me reading it in a physical format. This book takes place in a fantasy world, and I believe we have 4 main characters who are all in kind of different social positions and positions in their lives. So for example, one is a princess, one is a servant who's seeking revenge, and I imagine they all have to come together for a common goal. I think that this is one that has multiple points of view. I think it might have all 4 points of view, which is really interesting because either that works really well or it doesn't. But I am very intrigued by this. I have not read Half Bad, which is her previous trilogy, which is kind of divisive. I think people either love it or they hate it, but I'm looking forward to giving this a shot. I have heard some things about it. I don't know if I'm going to like it or not, but I really do want to give it a try and see what I think. Again, this is going to be for my Yalk TBR anyway, so I'm going to be achieving something by reading it. Next up, we have 2 books that I bought at the same time. So this was for the book event that I chaired earlier this month. I have Elizabeth is Missing, and this is by Emma Healy, and I have The Well by Katherine Chanter. So these were the 2 authors who were at that event, and that event focused on their second novels, respectively, and these are their debut novels, which I believe were very, very well received. Particularly Elizabeth is Missing won the Costa Book Award in 2014. So Elizabeth is Missing is about a woman named Maud, and she's kind of in the, I believe, the early stages of Alzheimer's. She's beginning to forget things, she's beginning to forget people. However, she has the sense that her friend Elizabeth is missing, and she wants to try to find out what happened to her. If I had picked this up on my own, I think I would have expected it to be a kind of thriller, but if her other book is anything to go by, it probably won't be. So I also have Katherine Chanter's The Well, and this sounds like a dystopian novel. It just doesn't say much here on the back. It sounds like a dystopian novel. It's supposed to be a kind of intriguing novel of like psychological suspense. So I know almost nothing about that. It's almost completely blurbs on the back of this. It doesn't actually tell you what the book is about, but I'm really intrigued. I liked the writing of her other book, and this seems like it's going to be maybe a little bit more up my alley. Next up, we have Circe, and this is by Madeline Miller. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I don't know if I'm saying that name correctly, but that's how my high school English teacher said her name, so that's what I'm going to stick with. So Madeline Miller wrote The Song of Achilles a few years ago, and it's supposed to be amazing. It's a book I've not read, but I would really like to read. And in kind of a similar vein, this book follows Circe, the Greek goddess, as opposed to Achilles, the Greek hero of mythology. So I believe this is kind of a feminist retelling of Circe and her origins and how she comes into play in Greek mythology. It's a beautiful book. Like, look at this. Seriously. I think that this is such a stunning book. I'm really looking forward to this. I've heard nothing but amazing things about this. It's going to be a little bit different for me, I think. I think it's going to be a little bit of a slower paced read, but that is not necessarily a bad thing. I think that this is going to be one that I really like. Next up, we have another beautiful book and another retelling. This is The Queens of Innis Lear. This is by Tessa Gratton. All I know about this book, and all I needed to know about this book, quite frankly, is that this is a feminist fantasy retelling of King Lear. And King Lear is one of the problematic plays for me. It's a great play, but in terms of sort of the female characters, I really struggle with that one. I love Shakespeare. I've seen almost every single Shakespeare play. King Lear is a really tough one for me because I both love it and really dislike it at the same time. So I'm very, very much looking forward to reading this. I, again, have heard wonderful things about it. It's a bit on the longer side. This is what, 500 some odd pages? About 550 pages, but I have a feeling I'm gonna love this. Next up, we have a book that I'm incredibly fascinated by. This is I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara. There's a whole long spiel that I could go on about this. I am very much a true crime buff, a murderino. I am very, very intrigued by this book. This is a true crime book written by Michelle McNamara, who was a true crime journalist for many years, and she was obsessed, probably unhealthily so, with the Golden State Killer, who is a serial killer and rapist who has until recently, never been caught. I think he was operating in the 70s and 80s, never been caught, never been a word about it, and she is the one who's kind of kept this search for this killer alive, and just before this book came out, he was actually caught, and it's a little bit tragic actually because she had passed away before this book came out, and this was finished by her sort of true crime journalist friends and Patton Oswalt, who is her husband. I would really, really, really want to read this, but apparently it's kind of nightmare-inducing, so we'll see how well that goes. But I have read very little true crime. I think I've only ever read Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, so I'm really looking forward to my first kind of proper true crime book. We're almost there. I have one last set of books to show you guys, and these were books that I swapped with other book bloggers when I met up with some people in Birmingham earlier this month and had an amazing, amazing time. So I just really quickly wanted to say thank you to everyone who showed up and everyone who traded proofs, because that was actually really, really fun. I have so many books here that I don't know if I would have had the chance to read otherwise. I'm going to try to rattle through these really quickly because I feel like this video is going on forever and ever and ever. So the first book that I have is House of Ash by Hope Cook. This is one I've not heard of before, but it sounds really intriguing. It sounds like kind of a YA horror novel, which I'm very excited about. Next up, I have Ink and Bone by Rachel Kane, and funny story, when I was in the works looking for the 2 Broken Earth books and The Tethered Mage, I found like the 3rd in this trilogy and didn't realize it, and I almost bought it instead of like starting from the first one, and this ended up being offered for swapping anyway, so I snatched this up at the first opportunity. This book takes place in a timeline in which the Library of Alexandria did not burn down, which is such a selling point for me because sometimes, I'm not kidding, I lie awake at night and think about the Library of Alexandria and how much was lost. It's pathetic, I know. Next up, I have a proof of The House with Chicken Legs by Sophie Anderson. This has been getting a huge push in Waterstones here in the UK. You can't go anywhere without seeing this book in a bookstore somewhere. This is a retelling of the Baba Yaga sort of folktale in Russian folklore. So the back here says, "My house has chicken legs. 2 or 3 times a year without warning, it stands up in the middle of the night and walks away from where we've been living." This sounds wonderful for a number of reasons, but one of the things that I've been really intrigued about this book is that I grew up with that fairy tale because I had this amazing, amazing volume of fairy tales, and the Baba Yaga folktale was in that. So I know very little about Russian folklore other than what I've read in The Bear and the Nightingale. So I'm really looking forward to this. It just sounds really fun. Next up, we have the exact opposite of Okay by Laura Steven. This is a novel that's all about a girl who is a sort of aspiring stand-up comedian and filmmaker, and she ends up having some photos of her in a compromising position leaked and sort of becomes a national media sensation. And this book is all about sort of slut-shaming in the media and sort of standing up for yourself. It sounds wonderful. Again, it's a contemporary book. That's not something I usually read, but this is another instance of a book where I thought that the premise sounded really, really promising, so I'm very much looking forward to this. This is also on my Yalk TBR. Next up is a book that I have been intrigued by, but again have seen no reviews for, but it's gotten a little bit of coverage on book Twitter. This is White Rabbit, Red Wolf, and this is by Tom Pollock. All I can see on the back here is an electrifying thriller about murder, maths, and the mind. It sounds like it's going to be a very cool, intriguing, maybe mind-bending book. I don't know what to expect from this, but it sounds very promising. Oh my god, the last book that I have to show you is one I've had my eye on for literally over a year. This is Cogheart, and this is by Peter Bunzel. So the back here says, "Lily's life is in mortal danger. Her father is missing, and now silver-eyed men stalk her through the shadows. What could they want from her? Murder, mayhem, and mystery meet in this fantastical adventure for readers to treasure and share." So this came out in 2016. I think there's at least one sequel to this book. There might even be a 3rd one coming out soon. This looks wonderful. It looks adorable. Middle grade makes me happy, but I very, very rarely read it. And I am so happy that I finally have a copy of this book because seriously, I've been staring at it for a very long time. That is it. That is it for this video. We're finally done. We're finally through those 24 books. It is slightly ridiculous how many books I brought in this month, but I did end up reading a lot of books this month as well, so it almost kind of maybe balances out. Also, just as a heads up, I did end up reading a couple of books that I bought this month, including The Poppy War, but I brought those up in my previous video in my May wrap-up, so you can go ahead and check out my thoughts there instead of here. So let me know in the comments if you picked up anything really great in May, if you've read any of these books, if you have any recommendations of where I should start, then definitely let me know because I would love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this video, I post bookish content to this channel fairly frequently, so don't forget to subscribe and I will see you next time.